Today, by the way, is my 36th anniversary of my near-death experience. It happened 36 years ago today. And I still get choked up thinking about that love. And as I got closer to the light looked like it was just millions upon millions of fragments of light. It was infinite. It just went on and on forever. And they were all moving, kind of dancing. And and the movement of all these fragments of light looked to be like it was of one mind. They were all in union together. Well, as I got closer, 3 fragments broke away and they came toward me and they started greeting me. And they were welcoming me home. They were welcoming me home. And I recognized them as family. Now, I told you I didn't really have my family was, I never really had a sense of family in life. But these light beings, I recognized them. I recognized them as my soul family. And eventually a dozen of them came and greeted me, welcoming me back. And we moved further into the light together, and we started to experience a life review. And in the life review, I got to see everything in my life, not only from my perspective, but everyone I'd ever interacted with from their perspective. I got to see their anger, I got to see their frustration, I got to see their love. And so it was like my consciousness had fragmented into these multiple streams of consciousness, multiple streams of consciousness. And I was experiencing my life in its entirety over again. And I got to see things that, well, like I said, I was a brash young man. I was a street tough. And I did a few things I wasn't too proud of. And my soul family were in this experience with me, and they were experiencing it the same way I was. And so some of the unsavory parts of my life I wasn't too proud of, and I was a little ashamed that they had to experience this. But they just loved me. They just loved me and supported me. In fact, if anything, they were excited to be able to experience this part of my life.
I was taken into a place, and I don't remember by whom, but I was guided into this area where a bright light in the distance began to get closer and closer. And as the light got closer and closer, it just encompassed me in a full way that's not really possible to explain here. It wrapped me in a feeling of total peace and comfort that I had never known before and have never known since. I was connected to this, and I could understand it. I could understand so many things so rapidly and completely that there is no way to explain this to anybody. And at some point, I realized I would have to go back. And I pleaded not to return. And I was told, well, you must return. And these beings around me of light indicated you have to return. There's very important reasons. I don't recall what they said. I don't know what the reasons were. But the next thing that happened was very powerful to me and has always stayed with me, as has the whole experience. Although this sounds egotistical, I don't know how to say it other than what happened. Millions, or at least thousands of these light beings surrounded me and began to sing. And when I say sing, they were making music of a beauty that was improvisational and full and complete, like I've never heard in this world. And they were basically praising me and sending me back to do God's work. And at that point, the next memory I have, I woke up in a bathroom in this apartment I was at, and I began to look around for a razor blade to slice my wrist. Now this might sound very, very desperate, but it wasn't that sort of thing. I simply said to myself, I have to return, I want to return right now. I found a razor blade, and as I did, a voice very clear and distinct said, no. And at the second that voice happened, somebody said, I think he's in here, and the door opened, and I dropped the razor blade, and I went on with my life at that point. I went to my wife. She wasn't my wife, she was my girlfriend. She later became my wife. I was 17 at the time, and explained all of this. But I had no reference, nothing in life to compare it to. Remember, this was the early 70s, and so I really didn't have a perspective which I could place it in.
He wasn't the guy with the big white beard and the lightning bolts, let me put it that way. And I'll tell you what God looked like, kind of. I've never been able to paint this. I've been trying and trying and trying, and I just can't get it. Yet, not yet anyway. So pretend you are the Hubble Space Telescope. And so this is surrounding you on all levels, okay? Everywhere. And you know when you look at a photograph of a galaxy is made up of little points of light, stars, right? Little points of light. Jillions of them, right? And in this case, it was infinite. It went on forever. Little points of light. And I was one of those points of light. And we were all connected.
And then all of a sudden I popped out back into the tunnel again, and now I'm being absorbed by the light. And the light says three things to me. The light says, Andy, don't be afraid. Andy, I love you. Andy, we love you. And when the light said, Andy, we love you to me, surrounding the light are countless billions of other lights. And I knew them all. And I said to myself, it's so good to be home, because I knew that I was home. That's where I belong.
And there were this tunnel of light, and I went through the tunnel of light, and I went out of this body, and I became, a being of light. And there were others there with me, surrounding me with this love. And after that, it just melted in just oneness and consciousness. And there was just this beautiful unconditional love where everything is perfect. And so that was really a really intense experience at that moment. It was just beings. It was more light beings. Mm-hmm. So there was no special form. It was just more a sense of connection with those beings than connection to form.
And there I was lying there, this heart pump keeping me alive, all these IVs, wires coming out of me. So I'm looking down on myself. I could see myself there. And yet, while I'm standing in the middle of nowhere, I have the same green hospital gown on, but I'm whole. And I say to myself, what can possibly be going on here? What is happening? And in that moment, I realized that I was connected to the universe, the vast wisdom of the universe, all of it. It was almost as if someone had picked up the grains of my being and threw them into a strong wind and just scattered me across this infinite, timeless expanse of the universe. And it was such an amazing thing, because while I was standing there in that place, I felt like all I had to do, if I had a question, all I had to do was think about it, and the answer came to me. It was, in that place, I did not experience, I know that I've read some other near-death experience since I've had mine, but there wasn't, the five senses had no functionality in that place. In other words, I couldn't smell anything or taste anything or feel anything or hear anything. It was just me standing in the middle of this timeless expanse. And having been raised Catholic, I was, I was disappointed that I did not see any divine being, which was an interesting part of my experience, because I did not see angels. I did not see Jesus Christ. I did not see anything. But what I did feel, and what was kind of imprinted on my spirit in a way that I wholly and completely understood, it was like their communication is telepathic. It's sensed and felt and then absorbed. That's how communication is. It's without words. That was my experience. And the Creator impressed upon me things like, I am omnipotent. This is the source of divine energy. This is your real identity. This is the power back of all things. And while I was in that place, I began to see complex mathematical equations just hanging there. And I thought to myself, wow, the laws that govern the universe are so simple, so elegant. And I understood in that place that I was not my body, my race, my religion. I was part of this love and light that is this expanse, this divine energy. And what happened next was so fascinating, because then I saw and became part of this web of twinkling lights. And the way I describe this web, which is what the book is named after, it was trillions and trillions and trillions of neurons woven together in this beautiful tapestry of twinkling lights. And they just were infinite. And they just seemed to hang on the ceiling of the universe. And as I stood there, I realized that we're all connected. Everything is connected. We're all one. And that was the message. It was a message of oneness and unity.
I call them light beings because they literally were glowing from within. They're on a higher dimension of the universe, if you like, whereas we are kind of like, I'd say we're more in the physical sort of lower energies of the universe. So that's how I defined it. So I call them beings of light because they just, they really were. They were on a different level altogether.
The woman who ended up operating on me had been on duty for 40 hours, and so when she took my case, she was very tired herself, but she decided to operate anyway, and it was going to be a long surgery. They were going to have to pick a lot of bone fragments from my spine. So I was wheeled in for surgery, and then I don't know how long into the surgery, but probably long enough for them to open up my back and my hip. My spirit form left my body, and I remember getting just so excited. I saw the body on the operating table. I thought, we go on. Like, this spirit form, this part of me continues on after death, and I knew this immediately. It was almost like I was up in the corner of the room, and I had this knowing of my spirit form as this mirror image of my body, but it was light. It was composed of light. And I was looking down at the surgeons working, and I remember thinking, there's so much blood. Why is there so much blood? And the blood seemed to be spilling onto the sheet, and it looked really gruesome. I later found out that the cause of death was, I bled to death, and that was basically, there were internal injuries that were spilling over. And so I looked at that, but then I looked up, and there were these light beings. Now, I call them angels. They were just these intelligent beings, and they were unlike anything I'd ever imagined or thought. I didn't think of angels like this. Normally we think of angels with wings, but these were just, they looked like they had shimmery robes, and they weren't male or female. They sent telepathic messages to me. They said, you'll be fine. You'll walk, you'll run. Don't worry about this. We've got this. And then they almost playfully said, watch this. And they sent this blast of energy through the back of the surgeons into their hands, and it lit up my whole body. So I knew that they were participating in this healing. The neurosurgeons were great and talented, but I remember thinking, they're so smart, and I bet they have no idea that light beings are working through them. The experience felt real. It didn't feel like a dream. This felt like an added reality to this reality. So the way we're looking at everything, and it looks 3D, it felt like I had opened up 4D, 5D, 6D, whatever. It just felt as if I had opened to see what happens beyond the veil. These angels were participating with my surgeons, but they were just there in another realm that the human eye can't pick up on, but the spirit can.
And suddenly there was a pinpoint of light in the distance. And I hear a voice at the same time as I'm watching this light travel this distance to me at the speed of light. And the voice says, "Is this what you really want?" Well, I had never even considered that this was what I want. It was what I had to do in my view. And so this light comes to the edge of this barrier, whatever this is, and it's a man, in the shape of a man, and he's made of light, and his hair is flowing, and his robes are flowing, but he's just beautiful and made of light. And I say, but my life is so hard. And all of this is just like this energy exchange, thought exchange, and it's just bam, 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 bam. And he says, well, you can't skip over parts. It's supposed to be hard. You've done a lot of nonsense in your life. Was kind of the message that I got, that I'd been, even though my life had been really, hell, and I really felt like I couldn't have changed anything. Like the message that I got is that I've always been in charge, and that this was all part of it. The experiences that I was having was part of this grand experience, and that was for my good. And then, and I was still just, kind of dumbfounded, number one, that processing that I'm having this conversation.
So I just kind of was floating, I guess, and then moved around, and then I saw this amazing light that was so magnificent. This light had a beam. This beam of light was a lady, a beautiful lady, but just not for the beauty of it. She was, or she is, everything. Everything. When I say everything, it's love. It's peace. It's everything that you can ever want or dream or want to go to. She was it. She is it. She communicated telepathically, and I understood. I wanted to curl up in her arms and just stay there. I didn't want to do anything else but that and be part of this forever.
And I think part of the near-death experience is there's a veil of forgetfulness placed on those of us who return, because if you sat and pined for that splendor, your life would be wasted. So, while I was there, it was amazing. And I'm surrounded by color and by sound and by feeling. And I'm suddenly beginning to remember that I'm divine. And I said, oh yeah. And the next thing, oh yeah, oh yeah. It was a time of oh yes. It was like my amnesia was lifted, and I had this sense of complete and utter belonging again. And just about that time, my atmosphere changes in front of me, and two beings step forward. This wasn't what they had taught me as a child in Sunday school. It was completely different than what I had been led to believe would happen to me. My dead relatives weren't there, Jesus wasn't there, none of the Buddha wasn't there, nobody. Except for these two beings. This was my experience. So they step out of the atmosphere. They're surrounded by light. They were the light. And they're waiting for me to remember. And they stood very patiently. And I said to my crowd yesterday, do you ever have that feeling when you're in a different place than you're accustomed to seeing somebody and you can't remember their name to save your life? This happens to me as a doctor all the time, where you could have been coming to me for 20 years and I know your name and everything that's ever happened to you when I'm in my office. But in aisle 9 of the frozen food section, I can't remember your name. And it was very much so that sensation. I was going, God, I know you. I know. A little help? A little help? And they just waited. And then it hit me. And I was like, this is true. I've got my own watchdogs. You're my cheerleaders. You're my cheerleaders. You're with me. Yeah. And then this great family reunion took place. And this feeling of having been loved from the beginning of time.
And I could see more light coming in, and the tunnel started to kind of feel more expanded. And I started to kind of feel relieved because, it wasn't so scary and so dark anymore. And I could then start to see light beings by my side. I really couldn't make out their faces necessarily, but they were about 4 or 5 light beings kind of moving upward with me. And it started to really feel peaceful and serene and extremely comfortable. Like I was just in peace, and all of that fear and scary moment that I had gone through was completely gone.
Everything had a natural transition, but at that point, suddenly I wasn't there at the temple anymore. I was behind, for lack of a better word, a veil. I wasn't in the light, I wasn't in the dark, I wasn't in earth, I was in a place that was quasi-light, and before me in the distance stood a very, very large being of light, a male being of light, indistinct but male. And he said, "You need to go back now." And he was quite an authority figure. And telepathy works very well. And so I said, "You're the representative of God?" And he said, "Yes, I am." But I really wasn't too thrilled about this prospect, and I wasn't moving very quickly at that point. So by his side, much smaller, appeared 2 ovoid shapes. You might think of them as opalescent eggs. And they were pulsing with light and energy. And from these opalescent eggs, I don't know if there is a word for heart path, empath, I guess would be it. Instead of a thought coming from them, a feeling came from them.
This time, way off in the distance, I see a little bitty light, real small. And I can't tell if it's moving towards me or I'm moving towards it, but it's slowly getting larger. And as it comes up, I can see a being in that light. It's about 8 feet tall. And there was this feeling of absolute, total, complete acceptance. What we call love here is nothing more than fascination. That was love. It did not matter anything I had ever done or thought. And that all sprang up around us all at once, 360. Everything was totally accepted. Things that I wasn't what you would call a model child, as my mother frequently pointed out. Some of the things I pulled, I thought were going to get me on the grease slide to the hot spot down below. Were treated with a rather vast, gentle amusement. Things that I hadn't even thought about were pointed out to be rather drastic errors of judgment. And at the moment, I'm saying, what? And over here I can see a thought. And about 3 or 4 days later, I can see a repercussion. I can see the connection between the thought and the repercussion. I can see an action over here, and maybe 2 months later, I can see a repercussion. And I say repercussion with meaning. every thought, every action, and every feeling you have, and that we have here, creates something. Now, whether it's beneficial or not, that's your choice. So, as they got closer, and I say they because this was a being of complete blending of both male and female characteristics, a perfect blending. And they referred to themselves as we, not I. Now, I have to stop here a minute. That being of light, and the face, the description, the planes in the face were, you know, you've seen these drawings where they show the planes at the different angles for artists to study. It was like that, but it was rounded. I couldn't see. Here we have identical, different faces. Nobody is identical. And there I got that this is a model of the perfect blending and the perfect being, and that's what is being presented to me, because they couldn't show anything else for me to be able to grasp as a 14-year-old.
I became a light blue globe or orb of consciousness. I became this light blue ball, essentially. And I was facing a golden light. And this golden light is, people describe this love, and I use my own analogy to try to describe what it was like. And the closest thing I can come up with is all the love that ever was and all the love that ever will be for all eternity is being poured onto you in a single moment. So it was indescribable. I knew that no matter what I do for all eternity, no matter what I've done eons ago, that this love will never change. Never, no matter what. And it was a sense of profound joy and bliss that doesn't compare to anything ever on earth that you could possibly imagine. And so growing up in strict and stringent religions, this was not what I was expecting to see, this amount of love and no judgment at all.
I'm having thoughts and my body's in there. So there's an I that isn't associated with that body necessarily. So I am bigger and more expansive than what I thought I was. The body is like a coat, and I can leave it, and I can go home. It feels like home. It feels like we have returned to what we are made of. It is bliss. It is joy. It is total acceptance and no judgment whatsoever. It is being seen for everything you are, everything you've done, everything you've thought, and being accepted and understood and loved for that. Even all those things, the good, the bad, and the ugly, even all those things that you really wish no one would ever figure out that you had that thought, it knows. And I met with beings of light who were sort of the personification of this love, who just embraced me and surrounded me in this total acceptance, this total love. And I found myself saying, I'm not going back. They were about 15 feet tall. And I felt in a way like I was arguing with them, because I was absolutely sure I was not going to go back and nobody could make me, because it's nasty here. People are mean to each other. There's no love. What we think of as love is such a mild version, watered down version of what I experienced at home and what we'll all experience at home.
I was completely surrounded by starlight figures. that were shining in all different colors. And I was like, wow, there's a being of light. And now they are here. It approached me and it touched me. And at that moment I said, oh, you are a being of light. By being in their presence and feeling that state of home that I was experiencing in that realm of the light made me feel so well that I started to heal. And I just started to feel joyful and happy. And although they didn't or do anything, the sense of love was such that nothing else was needed. And that was the teaching I got from the very beginning. Everything is going to be okay. And although I couldn't understand that many times, how this can be okay, that was always the teaching. Everything is happening for a reason, and everything is following a path of perfection. We just don't know this, because we're just living and understanding a very little piece of the picture. We don't know what anything is for. And later in my life, I learned that the purpose of this was the beings of light wanted to show me that home was not a place. Home was a state of being. Home, heaven, is here and now.
And I left my body and flew through what felt like a tunnel of lights just flying at me, and then I just emerged into this world of brilliant white light in a place that was nothing but love. That's the only way that can describe it, just a complete feeling of love. And I stood before a being of light that did nothing but love me, was capable of only loving me. And I watched my life, I saw my life review, and I'm the one that condemned myself and criticized myself in the sense that I just wanted to do better, to be in this place and to be in this presence of this light that just unconditionally loved me, made me want to treat people better, and made me want to love myself. I think I was no different than a lot of people that are always criticizing themselves or feeling guilty about things. That's the way that I was raised. That's the religion that I was raised in, that, you know, God was someone to be feared and that I would be judged, so I needed to walk a straight line. And it was so different than that. I was loved unconditionally, and all I wanted to do was come back and do better and love people and learn how to love and forgive and be a better person and have something better to offer. And all of the things that I was taught all of my life about the way that religion was, or the way that God is through my religion, it wasn't true for me in that experience. So I came back with a real thirst to find the truth and find knowledge. Those were the two words that I woke up with that just, I heard them over and over and over, the importance of finding truth and seeking knowledge. So that's what my life has been about, trying to figure out what it is all about. And I'm open to anything. I would listen to anybody, read anything. I just want to find the truth in everything. But the one thing that I feel like I cannot go wrong with is loving people. And no matter how hard that can be to do at times, it can be really challenging and difficult, then I still have to go to that place where I felt that unconditional love coming from God and try to get that feeling in my heart and then send that out to other people.
All of a sudden I was traveling into a light. And it felt almost like when you lay in the pool, in the swimming pool, and you're just a little bit above the water and you're just holding your breath. It was like that. No pressure, no weight on you, you know. There's pressure on you, but no weight. You know, it was different. It was even better than that. It was like you had no pressure or anything on you and I was traveling, and I remember almost like I was just standing upright and moving toward this light. I saw this light down there. It was like, it was a doorway, and there was someone standing in it. And as I got closer, I saw this guy with long hair and long beard, and his skin was almost like porcelain. You know, it was really, really white. And as I traveled up at him, his skin color kept changing. It went from white to black to white to black. And it did that over and over, changing like all the skin colors of humans, you know, like all of us. And that was kind of one of my thoughts was, you know, I always wondered, you know, if there is a God and stuff, why, you know, why are we different colors, skin colors, and, you know, and so on. I mean, I know the science part of it, you know, I was just curious why, if it was just, you know, if God did it, why are we different colors, you know? And anyway, then his skin went, he turned gold, and his face opened up, and white light came out of it. And then he broke away, and he was just light. And I heard the most beautiful sound coming out around him. It wasn't music, it was just sound. It was, I don't even know how to explain it. It was just beautiful. And it like went through me. I remember almost like I was being drawn in by it. And behind him were a bunch of people standing in a half circle. And I remember everybody, there was a bunch of people like really, really close. And then as I got closer, because it was quite a ways away. It was almost like maybe 80 yards or something. I don't know if I'm right on that, but it felt like it was forever. I was coming up on it. And as I got there, and I saw this, there were actually people with wings. And I know how this sounds. I used to make fun of the stories like this. I was like, you know, yeah, right, jackass, you know, people with wings. That's a good one. And typical, you know, Jesus look-alike thing, you know. And so I remember just being, you know, I knew I was dead, and I was like, and then he stuck his hand out for me. And, you know, here I am not really believing in God and anything. And then he sticks his hand out for me. And anyway, I was like, no, please, you know, don't take me. But I could hear him talking to me and through his mind, you know, not like he wasn't speaking, but I could hear him. And the light that came around him too was, it was beautiful inside there. It was really like a soft white light, you know. It wasn't bright to hurt your eyes or anything like that, but it was similar to the light that came out of his face, you know, like when his face broke up and he was just light. Yeah, anyway, it's a weird ass story. He was trying to take me. I said, please don't take me. I gotta take care of my family. I gotta make sure they're okay. And I remember him smiling, and he leaned his head like and nodded at me. He called me by another name. I don't know. I still can't pronounce it. I can't say it. I don't know why. It seems like it's right there. And then he called me by another name. Or that by that name. Then he calls me Willy, you know. He was like, I'll see you in quite a while, Willy. And then I remember I had no pain there. There was nothing wrong with me there. And then all of a sudden I was back in my body, and I was laying on the ground in a lot of freaking pain.
A being, a brilliant, beautiful being that put out rays of color. I was too immersed in the energy it was producing, and it was communicating with me almost in a telepathic sense. But when you think about a big auditorium, and in this auditorium, it's a hot day and you're inside and all the lights are out, and someone opens the door and steps into it. You see their silhouette, and the light floods in around them, and that's what you see. We went through these places that became like mountain ranges, and we came into a place where I could see cities of light. The events that were unfolded me in these crystal cities, where I went before 13 beings of light, 12 beings, and then a 13th being that seemed to control it. These beings are where the words honor, great, and heroism, and courage, and awesomeness come from. I'd never seen anything as magnificent as I was watching this. And I had seen some pretty wild stuff in my life. And as I would watch this, these 12 beings appeared, then the 13th. Then each being would be delegated, like the 13th being would delegate the being. And then this being would begin to radiate. And it would radiate beautiful pastels, colors I have never seen yet on this earth. never seen them. And it was so, and it would go and radiate outward. And then it was all that was in the hall. That was all that was there. Then it started back. And as it came, it created an energy form here.
But so I see another blue orb approach me. And this particular blue orb, I had an intense sense of familiarity. I've known this blue orb for literally eternity. Like there was such an intense sense of familiarity with this being that I can't even put words to describe it. And I had no such familiarity like that on Earth ever, not even close. So, and mind you, while this is happening, I wanted to mention something very important, and that while I'm in this white mist and this cloud, there's two things I'm noticing. So people who have had similar experiences say no time. The way I like to describe it is it's the absolute 0 point. So it's the absolute nothing. It's the absolute nothing from which everything emanates from. And it was always nothing and will always be nothing. And in that nothing is everything. And you really feel it in that moment. You really feel that strong sensation when you're there of it's 0. Like I literally imagine the number 0 because it's circling and it's circling endlessly. So, and I also felt like my life on Earth while up there in the mist was something that occurred eons ago. It was something that felt like a distant memory, even though I seemingly had just arrived to this white mist. It felt like it happened 1,000 years ago. It's so bizarre. I don't know how to really explain it, but so this blue being approaches me and we communicate, and she begins to tell me, or rather show me, some sort of wheel. And it's like, I was talking about the 0, and it kind of looked like a 0. It was like this transparent, almost film reel-like structure. And in this film reel, it looked like it contained the entire history of the Earth, past, present, and future, all occurring simultaneously, all contained within this structure.
I suddenly realized that that body is dead. And I'm too young to die. I'm only 20 years of age. And then all of a sudden I thought the light at the head end of the room was getting brighter, but it was growing in an intensity of light to where if you turned on 1,000,000 welders' lights, you'd have some idea of the intensity. Out of this brilliant light stepped the most amazing being I have ever met. And those hospital walls virtually disappeared. I saw every single minute detail of my life, everything I had ever done in public and private, from seeing my own cesarean section birth through my 20th year when I was pronounced dead. And he threw a question, what had I done with my life? And I thought, well, I'm an Eagle Scout. Immediately he shot back, that glorified you. And the same question again, what have you done with your life? Now over there in that realm, there is no such thing as hypocrisy, because one of the first things that you become aware of is that the other being is totally aware of what you think, so you can't think one thing and say another. There's no such thing as misunderstanding what he meant. And yet, here was a being that knew everything about me. And he totally accepted me, and he totally loved me. Now that blew my mind.
In examining the nature of vibration, we find a very peculiar thing. If you represent vibration as a wave motion, you will notice that there is no such manifestation as half a wave. We do not find in nature crests without troughs or troughs without crests. Now, this wave phenomenon is happening on ever so many scales. There is the very, very fast wave of light, the slower wave of sound. Then there are all sorts of other wave processes, the beat of the heart, the rhythm of the breath, waking and sleeping, the peak of human life from birth to maturity, and down again to death. Now, let's examine the rules of this game. The basic form of the cosmic game is the game of hide and seek. Or you might call it the game of lost and found. Or again, now you see it, now you don't. And the slower the wave goes, the more difficult it is to see that the crest and the trough are inseparable. So that we become persuaded in the game of hide and seek that it is possible for the trough to go down and down and down forever and never rise again into a crest. Forgetting that trough implies crest just as crest implies trough. Light is pulsation, and between every light pulse there is the dark pulse. And so the Hindu image is that the self eternally plays a game of hide and seek with itself. And in that period, the Brahman, as it were, comes out of the act and returns to itself in peace and bliss. This is a very logical idea. What would you do if you were God? Isn't the whole fun of things, as every child knows, to go on adventures, to make believe, to create illusions, that is to say, patterns? And so, for some ways of talking in Hindu thought, this world is the dream of the Godhead. The Godhead is, of course, represented as in a way two-faced. With one face, he dreams and is absorbed in the dream world. With the other face, he is liberated. In other words, what you have to understand correctly is that from the standpoint of the self, the supreme self, they really happen at the same time. So that one doesn't realize union with the self after death, later than a certain time. All references to the hereafter should correctly be understood as the herein, as a domain deeper than egocentric consciousness. That is to say, when you get down to the bottom of the egocentric consciousness, you get to its limit, which is figuratively its death. Then you go on inwards, the self deeper than the conscious attention. And in that way, you go inwards to eternity. You don't go onwards to eternity. To go onwards is to find only time and time and time and more time, in which things go round and round and round forever. But to go in is to go to eternity. But in the ordinary way, when we're talking about this graphically and vividly, in imagistic terms, we can talk about the everlasting game of hide and seek, which the self plays with itself. It forgets who it is and then creeps up behind itself and says, boo! And that's a great thrill. It pretends that things are getting serious, just as a great actor on the stage. Although the audience know that what they're seeing is only a play, the skill of the actor is to take the audience in and to have them all sitting in anxiety on the edges of their seats, or to be weeping or laughing, or utterly involved in what they really know is only a play. So you would imagine that if there were a very great actor with absolutely superb technique, he would take himself in. And he, you see, would feel that the play was real. Well, that's their idea of what we're doing here and now. We are all the Brahman, acting our own parts, being human, playing the human game so beautifully that he is enchanted. Do you see what enchanted means? Under the influence of a chant, hypnotized, spellbound, fascinated, and that fascination is Maya. So what's going on here? It is not quite a situation, you see. It is not a view of the cosmos in which good and evil are so evenly balanced that nothing happens. Evil is just troublesome enough to give good a run for its money. It's as the game that is being played here is playing order against chaos. But you've got to have some chaos in order to play the game of order against it. But if order wins, there's no further game. If chaos wins, there's no further game. If they're equally balanced, it's a stalemate. So what happens is this. Chaos is always losing, but is never defeated. It's the good loser. And that is a game that is worth the candle. Let's take playing chess. If you get an opponent who can always defeat you, you stop playing with him. If you get an opponent whom you can always defeat, you stop playing with them. But so long as there is a certain uncertainty of outcome, and you win some of the time, then it's a good game. And this is simply a number symbolism, as I said again, not to be taken literally, of the way this thing works. And that's what this all is. It's jazz. You see? This is a big jazz, this world. And what it's trying to do is to see how jazzed up it can get. How far out this play of rhythm can go.